Welcome everyone, my name is Rigel and today we are back to my full review of Eurovision 2023. Now, I said in my previous episode that I was going to do the second semi-final and the grand final this episode, and I will do that, but first I want to get back to the hosting a little bit because there's some stuff that I forgot to talk about last episode. And the first thing I want to talk about are the postcards. Now, this was the first year since effectively 2019 where we had in-person postcards. That is postcards where we actually had people do stuff in them, and even longer than 2019 since we had in-person postcards in the participants' home country. So I think that was a really nice idea on the part of the BBC, to have each postcard effectively be composed of 3 locations, and of course that's the home country of the participants plus Ukraine and UK. And this does make me wonder how they're gonna deal with postcards next year. I actually have a poll up on Twitter right now, and basically I'm asking people whether they think the postcards next year will be just in Sweden, just in the participants' home country, or both, or actually just CGI. And a lot of people seem to think it's going to be both, and well, I agree, although some people did point out that Sweden has been pretty much overexplored at this point for postcard locations. But we'll have to see what happens. I think they will they will either do, I think, just the home country of the participant, or the home country plus Sweden. So we'll have to see what happens, but nonetheless, it's still very welcome that the in-person postcards are being brought back. Another thing that I was welcome to see return was the handover of the trophy. Now, obviously, in 2021, Duncan Lawrence wasn't there to hand over the trophy because he got COVID, so that makes sense. But in 2022, the trophy handover didn't happen because Måneskin were, I think, at that point probably on a flight to LA. They were just way too busy. So yeah, for me that just kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth, considering they didn't even perform Zitie Boni, the song they won Eurovision with. But still, that was, again, that just left a bitter taste in my mouth. So yeah, so I'm glad that this year Kalush Orchestra were there in Liverpool to hand over the trophy to Lorraine, and I hope this continues, and next year we'll see Lorraine hand the trophy over to someone else. And the last thing I want to talk about, and this is something that some people have pointed out, is the lack of French in the jury segment. There was still, of course, the French for, like, vous ne pouvez pas voter pour votre propre pays. You can't vote for your own country, that thing. That was still in French, obviously. Hannah Waddingham did that. But for some reason, they decided that after each country would get 12 points, they wouldn't read out the country name in French anymore. So, like, if 12 points went to Sweden, normally they'd be like La Suède 12 points, but this year they didn't do that, and I do wonder what's up with that. I think they were still doing that last year, but this year they didn't do that, even though they were doing French in another segment. So, if you were gonna eliminate the French, I would have thought you would want to do it everywhere, right? So yeah, I'm not quite sure what's gonna happen to that. This year next year we're hosting. We're going to Sweden, so we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll still have a French-speaking host. So yeah, but I'll talk about Eurovision 2024 in another video. For now, let's get back to Eurovision 2023, and let's get back to the second semi-final of Eurovision 2023, starting with Denmark. Or actually, let's start from the bottom up, because going by running order isn't really intuitive for what we're trying to do, because we're trying to analyze mostly the non-qualifiers here rather than the qualifiers. So yeah, let's start from the bottom up, starting with San Marino. Although the Eurovision website seems to be confused. They put Romania as 16th, even though Romania performed earlier, which means if in case of a tie, they should be first, ahead of San Marino. So let's go with San Marino, because that's what's listed on Wikipedia. And yeah, there's not much to say about this. He sang well, but the song wasn't very strong to begin with. I don't think anyone anticipated this to qualify. It was, sandwiched between very powerful songs. So yeah, this didn't really stand out. But for what it's worth, they performed very well. They were very nice people throughout the pre-party season. Although, yeah, there certainly were better choices in the San Marinese national final. Would they have qualified? I'd honestly say no. Even with those better choices. But this is San Marino. What you get tends to be pretty mixed in terms of quality. So, yeah, there's not much to say about San Marino. Maybe we'll have them qualify again one day. We'll have to see what happens. And let's hope Luxembourg doesn't meet this fate next year in Sweden. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about San Marino. And with Romania and what I want to say, I think, is I've read a couple sources, and apparently TVR didn't actually strictly sabotage Theodore Andre. You can check their budget. I think a lot of it went to bank accounts, and it sure wasn't Theodore Andre's bank account. But still, there was a little bit of involvement, but it seemed like, to me at least, that TVR was actively trying to make things worse. As in, there was this line I read somewhere that, now that the version of DGT performed at Eurovision was like half acoustic, basically. That was actually a compromise, because TVR wanted the whole song to be performed acoustic, and Theodore Andre was like, no, that's ridiculous, can we just have half of it maybe? And that's what he got. And yeah, again, if you check actual records of their budget for this year, it's ridiculously high. It's like over total, I think 324,000 euros or something like that, which is huge, and it's like more than 3 times the planned budget of Monaco for Eurovision 2023. Because of course they were planning to put 100,000 euros into it, but they had an absolutely huge budget, and I have a feeling a lot of it didn't really end up in the right hands, as it were. So yeah, I really don't see a way forward for Romania in Eurovision, frankly. They're not without their fair share of controversy, and I think the viewership was also really low, so low to the point that even Chile had more people watching Eurovision, the grand final of Eurovision, than Romania. If even a country in South America is watching Eurovision more than Romania, oh boy, do you really expect to see them in the contest next year? Come on now. Yeah, so I don't know. It's very likely that they're going to withdraw. A lot of Romanians are calling for withdrawal. But they might keep it up for money laundering purposes. I don't know. So yeah, the song itself, though, I don't really like the acoustic cut. It's kind of boring. But the original song, I think, actually did have some potential, but yeah, clearly they did not make the best out of this potential. So yeah, not much else to say about that. Let's move on to Denmark. It's interesting actually, because a lot of people before the contest were like, oh, he's got 10 million followers on TikTok, he's gonna get 12 points from the rest of the world because he has a lot of followers in South Korea or whatever. And well, I didn't check the exact votes, but I don't think rest of the world even gave Denmark any points. Alright, I just checked, and yeah, no, rest of the world did not give Denmark any points at all. You can see here that Denmark got 6 points. All of those points were incidentally from Iceland. Maybe because Riley is from the Faroe Islands, I don't know. Maybe this could hint at potential block voting in the future between the Faroe Islands and Iceland when / if the Faroe Islands debut in Eurovision. Who knows? But yeah, Denmark really only got points from Iceland. So had Iceland not voted for Riley, then Denmark would have been the third 0 points in the semifinal, which is harsh. It's almost as harsh as the 4 zeros that we got in the grand final in 2021. So yeah, I think there's multiple factors to this. I think a lot of people really liked this before the show, but I think the clear thing for me was that the vocals, frankly. Yeah, people have been saying that the whole season, and yeah, it's come to bite him on the ass, basically. And yeah, he just doesn't sound very good with his falsetto. And the room prop is nice, but they don't use it well enough to create an actual room atmosphere. Unlike, say, Rosalind, they kind of exit the room too early, and then the rest of the show just isn't big enough to make it look like, well, the music video, for example, which was also in a room. Yeah, so all these things combined, plus the fact that it was opening the show, I think people were just underwhelmed with it, which is why they didn't really vote for it. So yeah, not a great result for Denmark, who recently also came out to say we don't know what people in Albania like. And my favorite quote ever, perhaps Riley is too advanced for Europe. I mean, we're glad that you have confidence in Riley, but yeah, no, that's not how you deal with losses in Eurovision. With that said, let's move from Denmark, or rather a non-Danish person representing Denmark, to a Danish person representing not Denmark, that is Greece, because of course Victor Vernikos is Danish actually. His full name is Victor Vernikos Jørgensen. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of people were saying that this was actually quite likely to qualify as well, because there was also Armenia, Georgia, and a bunch of and of course Albania, and a bunch of basically Greek voting allies like Cyprus in the semi. But yeah, well, clearly that didn't happen. I'll look at the stats later, but you probably have guessed by now that Cyprus gave 12 to Greece, which means that had Cyprus not given any points to Greece, Greece would have had, 2 points. And where did those 2 points come from? That's right, Armenia. So, yeah, only 2 countries out of this 16-country semifinal, plus, of course, the 3 Big 5 countries, and of course the rest of the world. Out of all those, only 2 countries voted for Greece. So yeah, it wasn't a great show, okay? He sounded alright, but the staging is a whole bunch of WTF. Why would you write English words in Greek letters? Why would you put Victor himself on the LEDs? Yeah, just a whole bunch of WTF. yeah, it just didn't work out at all. I think there was a way to make it look good, and they just didn't get how to make it look good. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about this. The song is cute, but it wasn't particularly competitive to begin with. Let's just say that. It didn't stand out in that running order, and yeah, that's really all I have to say about this. Would they have qualified with Melissa Mantzoukas? I don't know. I haven't heard most of Liar, so no comments. They certainly wouldn't have qualified with that other song that even the singer herself was bashing, basically. So yeah, a bit of a mess, Greece, this year. There's more drama in the final, and we'll discuss that drama when we get there. For now, Georgia. This was a heartbreak for me, but I did look at this more in depth later. And actually, right now, I have a little video in the works, basically, about what went wrong with Georgia 2023. So stay tuned for that. All I'll say for now is that Iru is a very, very good vocalist. She said, actually, in a TikTok that she wants to return, and maybe she'll be like Polygonova, who didn't qualify the first time and then came top 5 the second time. Maybe that will happen, maybe not. But I will say, kind of spoiling my video a little bit, but basically, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but some people identified one of the main issues is that Marvin Dietman, the staging director, kind of misidentified the song and thought it was just a dramatic ballad, when in reality there were a lot of twists and turns. So yeah, it was a rather static staging for a pretty lively song, you could say that. Yeah, that's really all I have to say for now. Again, Iru sings very well, and I think, frankly, I didn't say this before because I still wanted to support her and support Georgia 2023, but frankly, Echo was kind of a waste on Iru, if we're being honest. But yeah, you have to wait until my video on what went wrong with Georgia 2023 to find out what I thought went wrong, particularly with the song. So yeah, just stay tuned for that, I suppose. In the meantime, Iceland. Well, there were some people who were big fans of this, but everyone, when Georgia didn't qualify, a lot of people thought Georgia would be 11th place, but then it turned out it was Iceland. And unlike semifinal 1, however, the gap between 10th and 11th wasn't really all that close. In semifinal 1, the real gulf, I suppose, was actually between 11th and 12th, which was, of course, Latvia and Ireland. But this time, all of the 10 qualifiers were actually quite a way off from the non-qualifiers. So you can't really say, well, you can say they were robbed according to your personal taste, but you can't really say they were close. So yeah, for what it's worth, I think, again, like Iru, Diliao is a very good vocalist. Her way of performing is, let's just say, unique, and there certainly are fans of drum and bass, in the Eurovision audiences. That's why they got points, duh. But in the end, I think this just didn't stand out enough among all the songs. It wasn't distinctive enough, perhaps. So that's why I think it didn't qualify. Plus, the staging, honestly, I think, for Iceland standards at least, was a kind of a letdown. It was similar to the national final, which in this case really wasn't a good thing. There was a smoke machine in the national final, I think, but they might have just been too expensive in Liverpool. I saw this leaked props list, pricing list thing a while back, and that was pretty expensive. So maybe they just couldn't afford it, but still, the national final staging really wasn't great. Personally speaking, at least, people might disagree, but yeah, I think it just wasn't impactful enough for people to actively vote for it. So if that's said, that's all the non-qualifiers. Again, I'm sad that Georgia didn't qualify, but in hindsight, taking a step back, it kind of makes sense, and I'll explain why in my upcoming video. But for now, let's look very briefly at the qualifiers. There's a few that I want to talk about. The first few are Estonia and Belgium, and because of the jury, actually, these two, at least according to my memory, are the only entries who placed better in the grand final than in the semi-final, because both of these songs got very good jury scores. I think Estonia was 5th, and then Belgium was like 6th or 7th or something like that, which really wasn't bad at all. And yeah, Belgium even got 12 points from like Georgia, I think, which is amazing. So yeah, that's mostly what I want to talk about, but also I want to kind of mention Poland coming 3rd in the semifinal. I don't really know what to make of this, but it's clearly more than just the whole Baby thing. I think at the end of the day, it's an easy listening pop song with a dance break, and I think ultimately that's what caused it to qualify rather than the Baby meme, because I don't think a lot of people outside of Poland will have heard of it. So yeah, I think it's more just that this was an easy listening pop song that caused it to qualify so highly, which incidentally, this is actually Poland's best ever semi-final result, even though it's far from their best grand final result. But still, yeah, I saw some German YouTuber, I think his username is Eurovision Histories or something like that. He actually predicted this. He predicted that Poland would qualify and it wouldn't even be close. And yeah, he's absolutely correct on that. I don't know how he got it, but hey, good on you. Yeah, other than that, I think, well, some people would be surprised by Austria not winning the semi, but honestly, the staging wasn't impactful enough, at least in my eyes. But we'll get to them in the grand final. And yeah, honestly, the rest of the results aren't super surprising. Maybe I would have expected Armenia a bit lower because they were 2nd in the running order. But the rest of it kind of makes sense. Maybe I would have expected Slovenia above Lithuania, but they were pretty close anyway. So with that said, let's move to the grand final of Eurovision 2023. Right, so there's a lot of stats to be dissected here, and I think I'm gonna go bottom up again, you know, the overall results, and I'll kind of give my thoughts on them, and also their performance, obviously. So first off, 26th place, Germany. I think this is the point at which a lot of us have been calling for jury reform. Certainly I have. Some salty Gadia fans have said that the jury should be abolished. I absolutely don't agree with that, but I do think that the jury at Eurovision are way too conservative in what they perceive to be good performances and good songs. For example, someone did point out that this didn't do particularly well with the jury at the national final either, but I would argue that's also because they didn't pick diverse enough people for the jury. So yeah, I don't know really what to say to this, because clearly, you know, there was love for rock entries this year. I mean, look at Australia, but clearly a lot of it just didn't go to Germany. You know, I think certainly it deserved more from the televote. I mean, it didn't really I mean, Australia didn't do that well in televote either with the public, but I do think it deserved a bit better. Maybe 40 points, 60 points, something like that, which of course for this year is a pretty big ask. I mean, 60 points is I think for the first time ever a televote top 10, but still I think Lord of the Lost they're very nice people. They fully embraced Eurovision as the German representatives. They even did covers of some other entries, and I think they approached it very well. Chris Harms sung very well. The whole thing was super put together. It stood out, and I think a lot of us were rooting for them, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. And I think I don't really know what Germany can do next, because honestly, they're on the right track. They're having a jury in their national final. They're getting songs that are more unique. Just go back 1 or 2 years. Who would have expected Germany to send a rock song rather than some bland pop song, right? They're certainly experimenting more with their national final now, and I think they're on the right track. However, I think it's probably still going to be a couple of years, maybe, before we really get the kind of power era, I suppose, of Germany. So, a very unfortunate result. I think certainly in the jury, I think there should have been more people who appreciated this kind of music, because what Chris Harms was doing, basically, like the growling and stuff, that's actually very technically difficult. It requires a very specified technique to accomplish, and I'm just sad that the jury rated other songs like Cough Cough Poland above this. So I think it's just an unfortunate result, and I think the German delegation are nonetheless on the right track. So that's really all I have to say about Blood and Glitter. Again, Chris Harms performed very well. The whole show came together very well. The photos were very nice, and unfortunately, people just weren't super interested in this kind of music. So let's move on from one Big Five country to another Big Five country, which is the UK. It's very interesting how things can change in a few days. I think prior to Eurovision week, a lot of people were saying that I Wrote a Song could possibly be top 15 or even breaking the top 10, and then suddenly a few days before the show, I think right as the rehearsal footage came out, people were like, oh, we're coming last again, and they weren't far off, sadly. There's a few things to be said about that. I think first off, while the art was good, the one key difference some people identified with Spaceman is that this wasn't close enough. With Spaceman, there were a lot of close-ups of Sam Ryder. With Mae Muller, the whole shot was just more distant. It was just the camera was just placed further from Mae Muller, and as a result, it just felt more distant. That's the first thing, and another thing is the running order. You'll know that closing the show isn't actually necessarily a good thing, because by that point, a lot of people will have made up their minds on who to vote for, and going last really doesn't help unless you're ultra impactful. Italy a few years back, that was it. But this wasn't ultra impactful as a closer, so naturally I think a lot of people just didn't really care to vote for this. So an unfortunate result for Mae Muller, but she's taking it very well. She's going back to hating on Tories, which is very nice, and she is performing everywhere, so good on her, and I think the UK, regardless of their result, should be very proud of what Mae Muller has done. For next year, I don't really know. I've heard that Tap Music aren't working with them anymore, although that was more because that wasn't really so much because of the result, but more because they didn't really have a contract to begin with. It really was just these few years, and then next year we'll just kind of have to see what happens. But of course, we have to remind ourselves that the UK did very well in Junior Eurovision, and they don't really have tab music there. So we'll have to see what happens. In the meantime, let's move on to 24th place, which was Serbia. Yeah, honestly, looking at the results of the semi-final, I think again their struggle was just to qualify to begin with, and now that they've done that, I don't think they really expected too much in the final. This had a lot of fans on Twitter, certainly. However, I think a lot of us understood that this didn't really have widespread appeal, as it were. So yeah, in a way it kind of makes sense, although I hope this doesn't discourage Serbia from sending more avant-garde entries. Certainly I think this was very unique for them, and I really liked it. It's still in my top 10, and it's not a great result for Serbia, but at least they qualified. And speaking of borderline qualifiers, Portugal. Again, I wasn't surprised about this result either when we were given the results. This was in a deaf slot, and you can see very clearly here that the jury rated Portugal a lot higher than the televote. I again like Serbia. I think their struggle to begin with was just to qualify, so I think they would have taken pretty much any result in the final. So yeah, I'm not super surprised, although I would have rated a bit higher. But with that said, let's move on to another borderline-ish qualifier, which was Albania. Going after Lorraine, this had almost no hope at all, and I think a lot of the points that went to Albania were probably because of either people who just weren't into the modern type of music that was from Lorraine, from Sweden, and that were more into ethnic type stuff like those from Albania. And I'm not surprised the jury didn't rank this very highly. They don't tend to rank ethnic songs very highly in general. I think it was a hard job coming after Sweden, but they dealt with it well. And this is a pretty typical Albania at Eurovision type result. I mean, this kind of happened with 2021 as well. Angela Peristeri. This kind of happened, the same thing as well. It was a borderline qualifier, and then it got put at a pretty bad spot in the first half, and then it comes bottom 5 in the final. Pretty usual Albania at Eurovision behavior. But what is not usual behavior is where Slovenia was placed. Of course, they came 21st with 78 points. A lot of those were actually 33 of those were from the jury, and then 45 from the televote, which I'm kind of disappointed about. I mean, they did okay in the semifinal. I think they came like 5th or 6th or something like that. But a lot of that steam just kind of went off for the grand final, it seems. Because they were actually going before Croatia, and I suspect that probably harmed their chances a lot, because a lot of people will no doubt be drawn to Croatia rather than Slovenia, and won't really remember Slovenia at the end of Mama Shche. So yeah, I think that was an unfortunate running order placement despite being so late. And I think like with the UK, there's an element of people already know who they're voting for. So if you're going that late, it really doesn't make much of a difference unless you're as wild and as out there as Croatia, which is why they got good points. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I think this really should have been Slovenia's best ever result. However, they didn't really do all that well, despite being very good performers. So yeah, I think that's kind of unfortunate, but still Slovenia hasn't qualified in the last few years, and this is certainly a success in that regard. So with that said, let's move on to another country that's placed above them a little bit, and that's Switzerland. Of course, Switzerland placed 20th with 92 points, most of those actually coming from the jury. Surprise, surprise. Although I'm surprised they didn't score higher, because I think a lot of people were pinning the battle of the ballots to be, between Estonia and Switzerland, and Estonia won out by a lot, clearly. I mean, 146 points, that is more than double the points of Switzerland. You could argue that it's due to running order, however, the jury is kind of specifically there to counteract the running order. Actually, in the televote, you can see that Switzerland actually won over Estonia in the ballot battle. But again, I think that's because the Swiss delegation threw cash at Sacha Jean-Baptiste to make the whole thing visually appealing, and that they did do. And of course, Remo Ferrer is a good vocalist, I have to say that, but to me, the whole proposal just seems very insincere, if you will. So yeah, I'm just not a big fan of this. So I'm kind of glad in a way that this didn't score any higher than it did. So yeah, I'm not going to complain about this placement, but one placement that I will probably always complain about is Poland, who of course placed 19th with one more point than Switzerland. When a lot of people, especially Carrier fans, were saying get rid of the jury, one of the counter arguments was that, do you really want to see Poland in the top 10 with that song? And yeah, I can see why they would make that argument. I mean, before the contest, a lot of people were pinning Poland as a potential last placer, rather than, say, the UK or Portugal or whatever. But no, Poland actually did very well in the televote, or at least relatively speaking, did very well. 8th in the televote, and then the jury gave them what I think they actually deserved, which is in the lower 10s. So yeah, to me, this should have been bottom 5, but again, I think it's going back to the whole radio-friendly song thing. It's an easy listening song, but even then I'm surprised because it was performed like 3rd in the running order, and that's really early. So I think we might be able to attribute some of this to the Polish diaspora, but I don't know. I just don't think that this was an entry worthy of so many points, and I'm glad that at the end the jury saw sense and marked it down. So with that said, let's move on to Moldova, who placed above Poland with 3 more points. And like I said earlier, the jury kind of tends to underrate ethnic songs anyway, so I'm not super surprised, although I still would have appreciated if they had ranked this a little higher, but it's still not a terrible result for Moldova. Again, I think the issue was just to qualify to begin with, and you can see clearly there that Moldova actually did pretty well in the televote as well, because even though yes, it's below Poland, but still for a country like Moldova with barely any budget at all, this was still a pretty good result for them. Although, as I'll point out later, again, Pasha Parfeni is actually the only returnee to have done worse, at least in terms of placement, than their previous result. Because, of course, Pasha Parfeni was 11th in 2012. But this time he's only 18th. Regardless, it's still not a terrible result for Moldova with barely any budget at all to speak. But a country with a lot of budget, and I didn't really expect to see it this low, is Spain. Right, with Spain, I think the main thing everyone's talking about is the 5 points in the televote. And in hindsight, I'm not surprised at all. It's a song that really takes time to get going. some people kind of blame the fact that this was kind of a little bit scaled back from Benidorm Fest. But in reality, I think the issue to begin with was just that the song isn't very approachable. You need to listen to it a lot to really get it. People obviously aren't going to understand the lyrics because they mostly don't speak Spanish, and yeah, it just wasn't very approachable to the wider audience. And I think a lot of people that aren't Eurofans would probably be like, "What the hell is this?" and just kind of ignore it. And plus it was going before Lorraine, so yeah, a lot of people were going to remember Lorraine more than this, and it was a similar case to Slovenia's Croatia. So yeah, I'm in hindsight, I'm not super surprised that this got a low televote score, although I am still kind of dismayed that this only got 5 points. I think the breakdown exactly was 3 from Portugal and then 2 from the rest of the world, and a lot of people noted actually that the rest of the world vote could just come from Chile. Like I said earlier, there were actually more people watching Eurovision in Chile than Romania. And yeah, so a lot of people were like, maybe the 2 points for Spain in the rest of the world vote comes from Chile, which I could absolutely see. Fair enough. Yeah, so it's a shame, but at the same time, 5 points isn't super surprising because it's just it's just low. It's just a low televote for a song that isn't super commercial. Nonetheless, I still will be following Blanca Paloma because her music is great. If you haven't listened to it, she posted a new song called Plumas de Nagar, and yeah, that's basically actually the other song that she submitted to Benidorm Fest, and she was actually surprised apparently that Ea was selected rather than Pluma de Nagar. To me at least, Pluma de Nagar was more commercial, although at the same time wasn't as impactful as Ea, but yeah, I think both of those songs are great. Go check it out. Just go to Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and just look up Blanca Paloma. And yeah, I will be following her career after Eurovision. And unlike Chanel, she probably does have an actual career. For once, she's actually releasing singles for once. And yeah, still not a terrible result overall for Spain. For a country that usually comes bottom 3 or 4, 17th place really isn't that bad. However, for our next country, I think they really expected a lot more, and that is France, who of course came 16th with 104 points, which is broken down into 54 from the jury and 50 from the televote, which, despite being lower in terms of points, is actually higher in terms of the ranking. So, where do I start with this one? First off, let me just say that I just don't really like these stereotypically Hong Kong baguette French type entries, which is why, despite a lot of people despite a lot of people who liked Cornelia also liking Barbara Pravi, I just couldn't get myself into it. Obviously, me, I'm a big Cornelia stan even, but yeah, I couldn't really get into Voila, from 2021. Before I became a Eurofan, I actually ranked it 24th, I think. It was only when I kind of rewatched everything that I put it at 11th, and even then, that's not super high. Yeah, I'm just not super into these kinds of Hong Kong baguette type of stereotypical French entries. So for me, it was almost kind of a vindication when this didn't place very highly. Yeah, I think France really were trying to win with this. I mean, the staging, the lighting, and everything. However, there were still a few things. I think, to me at least, the biggest issue was the combination of running order plus vocals. Not to as serious of an extent as Riley from Denmark/Faroe Islands. Not to his degree, but I think certainly the fact that she pretty much was a whole like semitone sharp, with the long notes certainly didn't help. And yeah, it still got a decent amount of points, don't get me wrong. That's 50 points from the public right there. But I think for other people who weren't as into this kind of stuff, that really sharp high note just kind of turned them off of it. Yeah, for a lot of it, I think she just kind of sang off pitch, frankly. And for a song that is so melodically strong, I think that's really not a good thing at all. You know, for some songs, if you're off pitch, who cares? Like Finland, like Serbia, for example. But for this, you really kind of do need to be on pitch, and she's capable of doing that somehow. You know, she did that at the presentation video. She did that at the radio show performance that she did a while back. She's capable of hitting the notes, but she didn't do it in Madrid. She didn't do it in Liverpool. And so in a way, I'm almost not surprised that this didn't do too well with the jury. You know, a lot of people, I think, were still kind of hyping it up, but the moment I saw that she had basically screwed up her high note and gotten sharper and sharper and sharper as the song went on, I was just thinking, yeah, this is not winning at all. It'd be even lucky if they had managed to get top 10 at all with this kind of crappy performance, let's be honest. No hate on Lazaha, she's great. But yeah, pitch-wise, this performance really just wasn't there. Yeah, it wasn't ideal, let's just say. I think and a lot of jury members noticed that as well. So yeah, it's I think certainly I don't doubt that France Télévisions has spent a lot of money on this performance, and I'm sad in that regard that they didn't get a good result out of it. But in the end, I really don't think they deserved top 10, to be honest. So, yeah. With that said, let's move on to a country that I think did deserve top 10, and that was Austria, of course. Austria got 15th place with 120 points. A vast majority of those coming from the jury. In fact, they were 8th in the jury, 104 points. But only a measly 16 points from the televote. And a lot of people are talking about this as well, and I'll just get it out of the way. It opened the show, okay? That's, I think, kind of its Achilles heel. I don't know if I used the expression correctly, but yeah, that's kind of what killed it in the televote, in my opinion. You know, don't get me wrong, the song is great. I think it's impactful enough to actually do well in the televote. But I think they were asked at the TikTok conference thingy whether they would be okay with opening the show, and I think they said they were okay with it. And well, look what happened. So yeah, I think the biggest issue was that they were opening the show, and yeah, ideally, like I said, with the UK and with Slovenia, you don't want to be too late, but at the same time, you also don't want to be too early, because people will forget you, and kind of, I think the ideal placement is probably near the middle. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I think they really deserved better. I think they deserved maybe even 100 points in the televote. But alas, it was not to be. I think they really deserved it. They worked hard. Yeah, but one issue I do think that we did observe with the performance was Marvin Dietman. It always comes back to Marvin Dietman. But yeah, basically, the staging wasn't impactful enough. I think it was professional enough, I think, for the jury to give it, 100-something points. But it wasn't stand out enough for the televote, and that's why it didn't really stick in too many people's minds. Yeah, it was clean, but it wasn't stand out, so that's kind of why, for example, Moldova had the flute, Albania had the family, Poland had the dance break or whatever, Croatia had the rockets. There's something you can point out with these kind of distinctive performances that got them to where they are, and they just didn't really have that with Austria. I see a lot of people now that are sharing a video where basically Taya and Selena were in like Victorian dresses and actually performing "Who the Hell is Edgar" outside some sort of old palace in Austria, like next to a fountain and something like that. And some people were wondering why didn't they bring this to Liverpool. And I also read that apparently Taya said that the outfits were way too hot, and also basically the performance was actually playback, so they didn't actually sing in it, and it was too hot, and it wasn't really an ideal situation for them to sing. Plus, I think they wanted to keep the whole red, white, black theme there for the final performance. And with these kind of dresses, it just wasn't possible, frankly. So yeah, I think maybe they shouldn't have brought that Victorian dress to Liverpool, but I still think there was a lot more potential to the song. But Marvin Dietman is Marvin Dietman. What do you expect? So yeah, a very unfortunate result, but still, it's still one of the most streamed Eurovision 2023 songs, which is very nice. It's in the viral charts of a lot of countries still. Yeah, that's still nice to see, and maybe it'll go viral on TikTok or whatever. But in the meantime, let's go to Armenia, who placed 14th with 122 points. 69 of those, nice, come from the jury, and 53 of those coming from the televote. So I don't really know what to say about this. I think a lot of people pretty much didn't know what to expect with this kind of entry. Eurovision Tom said it was, I think, what was his wording? An unknown factor or something like that. Yeah, a lot of people just didn't know where this would come in the ranking, and yeah, some people were saying that this could either come top 10 or come bottom 5, and in the end it came somewhere in between. So there's not really much to say about this. But for the performance, I still maintain that the dance break doesn't fit. Like, honey, it's great that you love to dance, but this song doesn't need a dance. And I think for me, it just ruins the whole atmosphere that was building up with the rap and with the first chorus and stuff like that. So yeah, I think for what it's worth, it's a decent result for Armenia, and we'll have to see what they come up with next. So with that said, let's move on to 13th place, which is Croatia. This, I think, is Croatia's best result, actually. Okay, just checked. No, it's not their best result, but for the last few years, they've been kind of flopping. They haven't gone to the final in a few years, and they finally done it again with an entry that is very much out there. Let's just say that. And don't get me wrong, I still don't like the song. I still have it like 37th in my top list. But for what it's worth, I do think had Harmonia Dissonante gone to Eurovision instead, they would have not even qualified at all, and disqualified. So good on them for that. Yeah, this wasn't super different from the national final performance. It was still it still sounded very well. He sung well. They sung well. But yeah, this wasn't super different from the national final performance. And yeah, as much as I still don't like the song, I have to congratulate Croatia on getting an actual good result for once. So good on them for that. And like I said earlier, if you're coming late in the running order, you have to be impactful enough. You have to be out there enough for people to remember you, and Croatia certainly has that factor. And yeah, so congratulations, Croatia, on 13th place and a 7th place in the televote, which is not bad for Croatian standards at all. So with that said, let's move on to 12th place, which is Cyprus. And you'll notice that actually from basically 10th to 15th, the range really isn't that large. Like, had Austria gotten 10 more points, they would have been top 10, and had Lithuania gotten 3 more points, they would have been top 10 as well. So yeah, the margin in this region really wasn't huge, but at the end of the day, a lot of us, what we care for is the ranking and not the actual result. So yeah, we're moving on to 12th place, which of course was Cyprus. And I think a lot of people were surprised about this as well, because a lot of people expected this to probably come like bottom 5 or bottom 10 even, because it was, let's be honest, a pretty safe entry. You know, it wasn't anything inventive, it wasn't anything new. So yeah, well, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but yeah, this is yeah, he's sang relatively well, although a lot of his high notes were on the backing track, and you know, that's just not cool. But yeah, it was just a very safe track, a decent performance, and I don't even think Cyprus expected to get this result, to be honest, but still, it's alright for them. And next year, apparently, they're doing some sort of reality TV show to select their representative, so good luck on that, Cyprus. But yeah, I don't have much else to say about Andrew Lambrou. So yeah, let's move on to 11th place, which was Lithuania, which, similar to Cyprus, was another song that a lot of people didn't expect to come this high. You know, a lot of people expected that it would qualify easily, but then not do much damage in the final. But then it did a decent amount of damage in the final. Not huge, obviously, but this got 11th in the jury, and still a decent amount of points from the televote, and came 11th overall, just barely missing the top 10. And yeah, I don't have much to say about this, except I will say the LEDs for this entry are gorgeous, possibly my favorite LEDs of the whole of all of the entries, frankly, because yeah, it was just a lot of wonderful like symbols and such. It just, the colors also just worked with each other really well. Yeah, so very gorgeous LEDs, and obviously Monica Linkite sang very well, and actually they did better, well, she did better than when she previously participated in 2015. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. Maybe next year we'll get another Monica L for Lithuania, but we'll have to see what happens. In the meantime, let's get into the top 10, starting with the Czech Republic. With the Czech Republic, or Czechia, you can see obviously they got a lot of their points through the jury. You know, 129 points, 94 of those points coming from the jury, and only 35 coming from the televote. I think it's pretty clear what caused this. I mean, well, they had to go after Finland, and in the next episode, I'll be talking about the exact like stats of everything, and you'll find actually that Finland actually gave 10 points to Czechia. Maybe they felt like they had the responsibility to kind of give Czechia a hand because they had to follow Garia. Maybe, who knows? Maybe people in Finland really just liked Vesna for some reason, which is fair enough. I liked them a lot as well, and I've seen a lot of people on the internet being very disappointed that that Vesna did not wear the outfits from the music video. On one hand, that's a fair criticism, but on the other, I think a lot of these people just have not seen what the Ukrainians have said, essentially. You know, after the initial reveal of the music video, yeah, a lot of Ukrainians, well, even aside from the lyrical content, they were even criticizing what they were wearing in the music video. Some people well, actually, there was two very opposite ends of the spectrum. Some people accused them of cultural appropriation. Basically, they're Czech women wearing Ukrainian outfits. What are you doing? On the other end, some people accused them of wearing Russian outfits. So yeah, I think Vesna just didn't want to have that debate at this point, so they just went for some less cultural outfits, which incidentally had the benefit of looking more united, united by music, yada yada. But yeah, they were they were all dressed in pink, and certainly, at least in the semifinal, they stood out a lot because obviously there weren't any pink acts in the semifinal. But of course, in the final, we had Gustav, for example. But still, I think it stood out, and yeah, I think this outfit choice really wasn't that bad, and I think the braids is a nice addition to basically give them something to do on stage. So yeah, actually, all in all, I'm very happy with this result, and like some others have mentioned, I think with this, they really needed a good result to convince the Czech broadcaster to continue with this whole Eurovision thing, and I think top 10 is enough to convince them to keep going. So let's hope we continue to see the Czech Republic in Sweden next year. But still, yeah, very good. Very good staging in general. I think the LEDs especially were really, really cool. Although I would have wished that for there to have been fewer, long shots. Actually, yeah, those are. I think there were just a few too many of those. I think like a handful showing off the LEDs. That's nice, but especially for example for the rap part with Tanita, they I think really could have benefited from some more close-up quick cut shots as it were. So yeah, I think any talk of potential winner is out the window, obviously, but I think this was still a very good result for the Czech Republic. This is actually their second best result, obviously, after Miklas Joseph in 2018. Still a really, really good result. I'm proud of them, and I think the Czech Republic should be proud of them as well, and clearly they are, as they have been streaming My Sister's Crown quite a bit, and it's appearing on their singles charts or whatever. So yeah, I think all in all, a story that ended out very well for the Czech delegation and for Vesna as a group. So with that said, let's move on to potentially one of my biggest surprises of this entire ranking, and that is Australia. They of course ended 9th in the overall ranking with 6th place in the jury, and yeah, I think we don't really need to talk about the televote. The televote generally just doesn't reward Australia all that much, but the jury vote is really, really high. Like, I mean, just go back maybe 2 weeks and imagine telling people that Australia with a rock song would come 6th in the jury. I think they'd probably just call you like a liar or something like that. But no, it's true. It's true. Yeah, Australia coming 6th in the jury with a rock song. I don't think even Voyager expected this. Like, you can see in their with the first time when they got a 12 points, Danny or Daniel, whatever his name is, was like eating a sandwich because they just weren't expecting to get 12s from anyone. But yeah, they got a bunch of 12s, and I'm not trying to go all conspiracy theory here, but I could suggest that maybe the EBU told jurors to vote Australia higher so that they can decide to stay in Eurovision. Maybe, I don't know. I'm regardless of what caused jurors to suddenly all vote for Australia. I'm sure one of my good Twitter friends is very pleased about that. Well, I know she is. But yeah, Australia coming 9th for the 3rd time now, I think. yeah, so that's something that's definitely unexpected. How many 12s did they get again? I think they got 12 from Portugal and also Iceland, I think. So yeah, definitely not something that most people had on their bingo card. With that said, let's move on to Estonia, who, like Australia, also did very well in the jury, but not so much in the televote. But yeah, I think everyone saw this coming. This was like the jury bait song. People expected as much that this would do very well in the jury and get almost nothing from the televote. But I'm still glad that people gave 22 points to this, because as you saw on the live stream, I expected less than 20 points actually. But still, yeah, very good result, especially in the jury. Obviously, Alika is a very, very good singer, and actually, as of recording this, only yesterday did I find out that Alika actually posted a new song at the start of the month, and it's called You. It starts off kind of like a piano ballad, but actually gets into something more rocky, because actually Alika has said that she actually really likes rock, and actually, if I remember correctly, she actually put Ollie and Bedwetters as her top two of Estilao. But back to her new song, she had Freddie from Annette and Freddie do the guitars on the new song. And also, I can't remember the name of the songwriter, but this songwriter actually also co-wrote a few other Estilao 2023 songs, like Whiskey Won't Forget, and also Valik by Kov. And this guy co-wrote all these songs and wrote You for Alika. So you can check that out. I think it's nice, although perhaps wouldn't have done as well in the jury as this, but we don't know. It's a nice song nonetheless, and that's actually one of the first times she's singing in English, because if you look at her discography, she's actually singing mostly in Estonian, including, weirdly enough, a song called Bon Appetit. Obviously that's French, but the main hook of the song is literally just Bon Appetit, but the verses and such are in Estonian. I'm getting a bit off topic, yes, but yeah, this is actually only her second English song after Bridges, so if you're interested, go check it out. But in the meantime, Alika did very well. I really like her outfit. It's kind of a mix between masculine and feminine, because, it looks like a dress top, but at the same time, it's also got that long train of a dress. So yeah, I really liked the outfit, and that one moment that was shown in the previews and such, where the lights of the stage just basically spread out from one spot. That was super cool. I'm not gonna put a clip here. I think you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that was really, really cool. I think, for what it's worth, they elevated the performance of the Estilao performance very well. They kept the self-playing piano, and again, like I said before the show, this is something that definitely a lot of people are going to be talking about. So yeah, I'm really glad for Alika. The whole season people were saying that this is not going to qualify because it's a ballot and the televote hates ballots, which isn't wrong, but also isn't as right as they might think it to be, because if you look at televote histories in the past couple of years, you'll find that actually oftentimes, despite being a ballot, a lot of them would still be classed as qualifiers by the public. Good examples would be like Die Together and Saudade from last year. And yeah, so actually the televote does have an eye for ballots when they see good ones. So yeah, Estonia came with a very good result in the final because of the jury, and we love to see it. So with that said, let's move on to Belgium, which is perhaps the season's biggest success story. Again, like I said earlier, basically, people were memeing about the Belgian Eurosong for like months and months. And when it came, it was actually a really good idea. Like I said earlier, it created a rapport between a lot of the artists, and in the end, it produced a 7th place result for Belgium. Now, provided a lot of those points came from the jury rather than the televote, but this is due in no small part to the fact that Gustav was singing very well. He was very confident on stage. He absolutely nailed that long note, and the stage show was interesting as well. He had 3 backing singers and also that dancer. It was just a very interesting show. And like I said earlier, don't underestimate the power of fun. There are some other more serious proposals, like, say, France or Armenia, for example, and they came below Belgium because sometimes people just want to have a little boogie, provided this isn't like some trendy little result, but still it's a very respectable result for Belgium, especially for Flanders, who haven't done very well in either part of the result. It was mostly you'd think of Walloon as the kind of Belgian powerhouse in terms of results, City Lights, Rhythm Inside, stuff like that. But this year, actually, Flanders has shown that they can do it as well. And this is actually, I'm going to mention it again in the stats section, but basically this is actually Flanders' best result since Tom Dice, which was 2010. So yeah, a very good result for Belgium here, and for Flanders, obviously. And so, people in Flanders at VRT are already kind of starting to plan Eurosong 2025, and we love to see it. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Eurosong, but in the meantime, it's produced a great result, and I think VRT won't hesitate to bring it back. And of course, not to mention that Gustav himself is very important representation of the LGBTQ community. He's got a husband that actually featured in the postcard, by the way. The person who took like his photos in the Belgian postcard was actually his husband. So yeah, that was very nice to see as well. And of course, there were the representation of minorities as well in the backing singers and dancer. So yeah, a very nice result for Belgium with something very different from what they normally send. Normally we think of Belgium as kind of being depressed, if you will, or at the very least like somber, and I think they would have continued that streak had they sent Gala Drago, but instead they went with something completely different, completely out of the ordinary, and they got rewarded with a good result. So with that said, let's move on to another country that got rewarded with a good result, and that is Ukraine. Now, with Ukraine is quite interesting because obviously there's a question of how much of this is sympathy voting and how much of this is people actually voting because they like this song, and I think it's a bit of both. I wasn't really particularly surprised when the jury marked this somewhat low because, I don't know, it just wasn't, it's not traditional pop, okay, so yeah, I'm not super surprised that this didn't get too good of a score in the jury. Yeah, that was a very, very high public mark, obviously, and, yeah, again, like I said, I think this is partly sympathy vote and partly because people enjoyed it, because actually this is an R&B song, relatively speaking, and you don't get a lot of those this year. In fact, this might be the only one. Like, I guess you could argue that Lithuania is kind of R&B soul-ish, but I think, yeah, it's more soul, more gospel than R&B. Ukraine is more like strict R&B, if you will, and it definitely gives a breath of fresh air. People expect like ethnic type stuff from Ukraine, and this certainly was something out of that box. So yeah, for what it's worth, I think this did stand out in the running order, and again, like I said, I think the sympathy vote did play a little bit of a factor here, although I think not as much as unexpected, because some people were thinking that Ukraine could get like another Kalush level televote, which I was never going to agree with. But still, yeah, hardly a bad result for Ukraine, who remain in the top 6. So, but next year they will have to qualify, and some people raised the possibility of Ukraine not qualifying, but I doubt it. We'll have to see what happens though. For now, let's move on to a country that placed above Ukraine in both the televote and overall, and that's Norway. Now, yeah, I'm not surprised that they didn't get too many points in the jury, at least relatively speaking. Because, you know, if you saw some of the leaked clips from the jury show, like, oh my god, her notes were so off. And in the live, you know, the actual performance on the Saturday night, that honestly wasn't that much better either, but I think she did hit more of her notes, like, in terms of percentage. But, yeah, I think a lot of this is down to the, not so much the TikTok hype necessarily, but the knowledge of the song that was generated from the TikTok hype. So people started streaming and people started realizing that it's actually a pretty good commercial song, and then they started to vote for it. I think that's part of it. I think it doesn't have to do necessarily directly with TikTok. But still, it certainly played an indirect role in getting us an all-Nordic top 3 in the televote, which I don't know when the last time we had that was, but yeah, it's certainly a rare sight for us to see. So yeah, for what it's worth, I think, you know, I think this probably was the best thing Norway could have sent. People still really obsess over Ulrika, and I don't get it. I didn't like her 2020 song. I didn't really like her MGP 2023 song either. So yeah, I'm pretty glad actually that Alessandra won MGP after all. You know, she still wasn't my favorite, but you know, it was one of my favorites. I think it was second actually, after some of my other favorites were like eliminated. But still, yeah, the result for Norway. And actually, I checked like this post where people were like posting their predictions on who's gonna do well and who's gonna win next year. And actually, a lot of people I noticed were seemingly thinking that Norway would win. This may be due to rumors about Kano, but I don't know. I don't like Kano that much. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. In the meantime, let's move on to 4th place. Just missing out on the podium by 12 points, and that is Italy. With Italy, it's an interesting case because actually, it's like the case of the UK actually. A lot of people weren't really paying attention to this. A lot of people were saying maybe this would come like actually a lot of people were saying this could come bottom 5 actually, which I always found kind of funny. I never agreed with that in the first place. They were always going to get a pretty good televote because it's Italy. And yeah, one thing I do find interesting is that actually despite being 3rd in the jury vote, the actual amount of points is only 2 higher than what they got in the televote. So yeah, that's interesting, but it is back to the history of this thing. But yeah, a lot of people were saying that after this was chosen, a lot of people were saying that this would be Italy's first bottom 5 result or whatever. And again, I never believed in that. But kind of like in the run-up to Eurovision, maybe like the week prior, people started saying, oh, suddenly they started saying that, oh, Italy is gonna do very well in the jury. And well, that's clearly what happened. Even though they are still a good way off from Lorraine, but we'll get to Lorraine. So yeah, there's a very good result for Italy actually, a result that pretty much no one expected, not even the bookmakers. You know, they expected a decent result, maybe like, you know, 5 to 10 or something like that. But yeah, they it's kind of funny actually, because last year there were more favorites. I think up till like the day before the final, I think Italy were still like second or third in the odds, and then they couldn't do that. They only got like sixth. And then now we come to 2023, where they're not really favorites at all, but then end up fourth. So yeah, it's kind of crazy how life changes, and it's definitely an improvement for Marco Mangoni from his previous result. So yeah, a good result for Italy. I'm not going to comment on how much they sent male ballots. So yeah, with that said, let's move from a male ballad to a female pop song, and that's of course Israel, who like I mentioned earlier, barely scraped onto the podium by 12 points, with 177 points in the jury and 185 points in the televote. Now, if I had to pick out one thing that I'm most dissatisfied with this year, it will be this, because who the hell in the jury thought this was a top performance, frankly? Because to me, at least, like, I don't know if I'm being too critical or what, but I'm being completely honest here. I thought that the camera work and the vocals of Michael Ben David was better than this. Provided there are more like quote-unquote gymnastics involved with this, but there's a good like 30 seconds where Noah Kirel isn't even singing at all, and the jury was like, oh my god, that's so good, let's mark it for 12 points or whatever. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. The whole staging was a mess. There were too many sweeping shots. She didn't even sound that great in the vocals, so I struggle to understand why this did well with the jury. I kind of get it with the televote, because the televote loves a banger, and this was like 24th, 23rd in the running order or something like that. So this was, recency bias, yada yada. But with the jury, it doesn't really make sense to me. Getting like, what, 3 or 4? 12 points, whatever, especially from Poland, which is hilarious. Like Poland talking about Ukraine, talking about war and stuff like that, and then going around and giving 12 points to Israel. Make of that what you will. So yeah, those are the non-top 2 entries of Eurovision 2023 Grand Final. And now let's talk about the top 2. Now, actually, if you saw it on the stream, I actually predicted the placements perfectly. I said actually that like around maybe like 4 hours before the show, I was saying that Finland would get first in the televote and fourth in the jury, and then Sweden would get first in the jury and second in the televote, and thus Sweden wins overall. And I have to admit, it was still a closer margin than I anticipated, but still, one of the reasons I got this was actually because in the last 3 years now, 3 years, we've had a pattern of basically the televote winner getting fourth in the jury, because in general, televote favorites, I think there's this expectation among jury members that they're not supposed to tank televote favorites, and so that's what happened. Måneskin got first in the televote, fourth in the jury. Kalush got first in the televote and fourth in the jury, and now Kärja comes first in the televote and fourth in the jury. It's just a pattern that I've observed from the last few years, and let's see if it happens next year. And I think everyone's anticipated this result for Sweden. Honestly, I think everyone expected Sweden to run away with the jury and then come second in the televote. And so that's why during the show, when Graham Norton said Sweden needed 180 something points to win Eurovision 2023, I was like, oh, that's so easy. She's definitely got it now. And well, she did, clearly. But Of course, as many have pointed out, Sweden was the only country to win the contest without receiving a single 12 points in the televote. Several other countries this year got 12s, like other than Finland, but Sweden didn't get a single 12 in the televote because all those 12s went to Finland, probably. So yeah, there's a little bit of a debate about this, about some salty Carrier fans are saying, like, should we abolish the jury? And that's BS, in my opinion. But I do think the jury criteria should be looked at, and I'm not sure whether this should have had such a runaway in the jury. And certainly, I think, like I said earlier, songs like from Germany, for example, really should have been valued a little bit more than they have. So yeah, nonetheless, I'm still a big fan of Lorraine. I'm still a big fan of both songs, actually, because I tweeted before the final as well. Basically, if you ask me who I want to win, my answer would be that I would look at second place, regardless of who won, and say, how did this not win? And that's exactly what I'm doing, because frankly, we had two winning performances this year. We had Lorraine, and then we have Garia. So I think Garia shouldn't really be too disheartened with his result. I know he is, but at the same time, he's been very respectable. He's been very respectful of Lorraine. He again reiterates that Lorraine is a very, very good person, and if there's anything to be looked at, it is the jury system, because Lorraine just played by the rules and won, and these are the rules right now, and like Alicia Michelle said, this is not going to change. It's maybe not the most ideal system, but it's what we have right now, so stick with it, roll with it. These are the rules. Sweden got the most points, so Sweden won. End of story. So yeah, those are my thoughts really on the Eurovision 2023 results. I think Lorraine was a very deserved winner. She sang so well with so much emotion. But at the same time, Garia performed very well as well with frankly what we could say is the performance of a lifetime. Unfortunately, I think Garia said he won't return to Eurovision, but still Lorraine has been very respectful and expressed her admiration for Garia, and actually on one radio interview actually stated that it would be a good idea to have Garia as one of the interval acts next year. So we'll have to see what happens. Maybe we'll see Garia in Stockholm or Malmö or whatever. So yeah, I think this was a very, very strong year. I think certainly a lot of entries didn't get the result they deserved. Cough, cough, Latvia. But yeah, there were a lot of quality entries this year, and actually, some people accuse us Eurovision fans of recency bias, but yeah, no, this year really was genuinely strong, even though the results may not be what we wanted. So I think as a whole, this year brought us one of the best Eurovisions in terms of the songs in recent history, even better than 2021, I would argue. So with that said, this is the end of this video, where we obviously looked at the second semi-final and the results of the grand final. Like this video if you enjoyed my commentary and analysis of the results. I'm telling you, there's going to be a lot more analysis of the results later, because the next video is actually going to be just a video on the stats, both stats that I've collected from other people and also stats that I collected myself. So that's going to be a long video, so subscribe if you don't want to miss content like that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Right, actually, one thing I want to talk about before I go, Crystal Ball ESC. Now, this is something that's pretty much new to this season. In previous Eurovision seasons, we have had people randomly leak songs and such. However, not to such a coordinated effort, because it seemed like at one point that this person, or maybe persons, had access to just about every single national final ever and every single internal selection ever, which obviously wasn't true. They obviously don't have access to, say, Armenia or Georgia, for example, but they still had access to a lot of different national finals, like MGP, like DMGP, yes, Benidorm Fest, and I think the thing that they're most well known for was them leaking one little snippet of Who the Hell is Edgar all the way back in January, and there's been a lot of talk about it lately as of recording this, because just yesterday, as of recording this, Taya, actually, no, not Taya, Selena from Taya and Selena, was answering some questions on Instagram, and basically, she said that when someone from that selection process leaked part of Who the Hell is Edgar, they just basically didn't have a good time. Selena said she was crying. Taya said, Taya was very worried as well, apparently. And, yeah, let's not beat around the bush. That is a scumbag move. You know, it's a lot of hard work, and I think artists would not really want to have their hard work be released without their consent, because, you know, it's a lot of hard work, obviously. Like, and, you know, I think they, you know, the reason they set a release date to begin with is so that they can kind of start to anticipate when they're going to get like criticisms and judgments and such. And yeah, no, it's absolutely a scumbag move from Cristobal ESC, even though later tweets showed that actually Cristobal ESC probably very much liked Who the Hell is Edgar. It was still really not the good move at all, and you know, let's just get that out of the way. But where I might differ with some other Twitter users is that I don't think the rest of the account is actually that bad. Like, for example, Eurovision Tom has actually just told people to like block and report Cristobal ESC, and I think that's definitely going a bit too far. Yeah, again, don't get me wrong, their move of like actually leaking songs and snippets of songs is definitely a scumbag move, but other than that, if you take that away, honestly, I don't think Cristobal ESC is that problematic. Because, like, if you look at their activities short of actually leaking song snippets, for example, what they're basically doing is they're leaking lineups of national finals maybe a day or two before the actual release, or leaking like song titles, for example, a day or two before release. And honestly, I really don't think that's much of an issue, because and also one thing they also did during Melody Festival, for example, is like basically a week or two before each heat, they would have like this kind of impromptu quote-unquote press conference where basically people would like ask Cristobal ESC what they thought specifically of the songs in that heat of Melody Festival. And you know, actually one thing that's interesting is that they're actually not allowed to post songs from Melfest before their release, like official release, because that could get them in trouble, copyright trouble with SVT, for example. So yeah, that was another thing they did. And honestly, in my opinion anyway, I don't think that's honestly that much of an issue, because it's nothing compared to posting that snippet of Who the Hell is Edgar 2 months before release. I have to say I never actually listened to it. I managed to somehow avoid the whole thing, because, you know, they have like a watermark, and So I just kind of stop the video before the watermark finishes and the actual leaked snippet plays. So yeah, I never actually listened to it. My first exposure to Who the Hell Is Edgar actually was when the song was actually released. So yeah, yay, good on me, I guess. But not everyone has that kind of self-restraint, and I don't blame you. Everyone wants to know more about future Eurovision content, and that's fair enough. But still, I think it's very much a scumbag move. And but other than that, I really don't see too much of an issue with Cristobal ESC, because with national final lineups, some people say that it ruins the surprise. But either way, you were going to get the surprise, right? For example, one of your favorite artists returns to a national final, and then you were always going to be surprised. It just depended really whether you got the surprise from an anonymous Twitter account, or from the Twitter account, or like some article from the broadcaster who was doing the national final. So you were going to get the surprise anyway, so it doesn't really ruin the surprise per se. Plus, it was really literally 1 or 2 days prior to release. That time they tried to leak it earlier than that, they got it wrong. That was Pesmaza Reviziu. So yeah, they actually don't really leak names too far before release. I don't know if that's damage control, or if that's just them not getting access to the names too far in advance. But regardless, they don't leak the names of national finals way before the actual supposed announcement date, so everyone could pretend to be surprised. They don't really leak the names too early beyond that. Again, it's probably like 1 or 2 days. So honestly, I really don't see that as that much of an issue. And yeah, like I said earlier, they would also do like these quote-unquote press conferences where they would talk about Melfest songs, and I reckon that really isn't an issue. It clearly shows that they have access to the song, but without actually outright showing the song to people to let themselves have their own judgments. So we're more like basing our judgment on what we can read rather than what we can hear and see. So yeah, there's a lot it's a lot more controlled of a I guess scrutiny in that sense. So yeah, for me at least, this might be an unpopular opinion, but honestly, short of actually releasing leaks and snippets of songs from like internal selections and such, short of that, I honestly don't think Cristobal ESC is that much of an issue. Oh, and a lot of people, or well, a few people have pointed out the official Eurovision Twitter account interacting with Cristobal ESC. I honestly think that is just Rob Hawley messing with people. I really don't think the EBU actually knows about Cristobal ESC. I really think it's just, Rob Hawley. He has his own Twitter account. Of course, he kind of knows what's going on Twitter. So I really do think it's just Rob Hawley messing with people. I don't think the EBU actually knows about it. So yeah, those are my 2 cents on Cristobal ESC. Let me know what you think in the comments below.